Welcome back to Brothers in Boots. My name is Mike,
My name is Jeff.
and today we will be talking about American tanneries with one special mention of a Mexican tannery that will make sense as we get to that part. If you're enjoying this content, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, we are going to begin with our explanation and deep dive, but also kind of love letter to our favorite American tanneries.
The big one that most people are familiar with, even if they don't know of any others, would be Horween. That's in Chicago. It's how people usually get introduced to nicer boots. And ask a lot of people who think they know something. Horween's certainly going to be the first one that comes out of their mouth. But as people get deeper into different leathers, it starts going down the list kind of fast in a lot of areas. It's not really the greatest in a lot of areas so much as it's the most well known and a long history. They they make all the sports leathers, and I think have from the beginning. So NFL footballs, MLB baseballs, MLB mitts, NBA basketballs. Probably missing something there, but they do special leathers for all of those leagues. Their CXL is likely their most well known.
Color 8,
CXL.
6L. Known for its very soft
Um,
temper, easy maintenance, has a relatively decent amount of pull up, though by today's standards, the pull up is minimal. Um, Generally recommended is the number one starting leather. Actually, wouldn't be high on my recommendations. One, due to the Chrome XL lottery, and number two, they actually have a couple better offerings that are better. My number one pick over CXL for most people would be Dublin. This happens to be Cobalt Blue Dublin. Dublin
love that one.
is I have actually three colors Dublin. I have this cobalt blue, I have a golf green, and I have their light natural. Dublin is characterized by having I'm trying to do this here, significantly more pull up in comparison to regular Chrome XL. I mean, it pulls up a ton more. It is a little bit more of a rustic leather, so this is done entirely the way they do shell cordovan. It gets a shell cordovan process, and while it has a little bit more temper and it is struck through, unlike Chrome XL, actually the majority of Horween leathers are not going to be struck through. Dublin is in all of its colors. It does get a little bit more of a rustic look, so it does kind of wrinkle and get patina in a more exaggerated way. But that's a lot of the charm of Dublin. Not everyone's bag, but overall, it's got just as easy maintenance as Chrome XL. It's struck through, so any scratches, dents, dings, cuts do at least show up the right color and will age back into the correct color. It's not a T-core leather like Chrome XL is. And overall, it holds its shape a lot better. Chrome XL does not hold its shape. If you've ever seen a backpack made out of Chrome XL, it's floppy. If you've ever seen like a coat or something made out of Chrome XL, it's a very flexible, movable coat. There's no temper to it. It kind of retains the last shape, but from there it kind of just moves wherever it wants to go. It is definitely regarded as like the number one beginner leather, if nothing else, just because basically it just needs brushed and a little bit of Venetian shoe cream here and there. But realistically, um,
Did you just move back to CXL?
yeah, besides like natural CXL, it would be pretty low down on my list. I would definitely choose Dublin over it 9 out of 10 days in the week, except for, as I mentioned, natural Chrome XL. As kind of a side category, I do have a natural horse Chrome XL. So same thing as the regular Chrome XL. This is just done with horse hide instead of cowhide, no bovine. Equestrian friends in the room. This is a pair of Roll Club underdogs in natural. Now this has literally zero pull up, as you're about to see. it doesn't change at all. The horse takes in so much of the oils from the process that literally there's almost nothing to pull up in it. It's Chrome XL and essentially process alone. So none of the stuff that you're used to seeing. And as you can see, the internal T-core portion of it is almost oiled to Tigo's level of dark. Usually CXL is a lot lighter than that. But yeah, I mean, I will say the Horse Chrome XL is a lot comfier. It is a lot more scratch resistant. It does hold its shape quite a bit better than Horse Chrome XL. But there is horse rump, so it's also kind of a obsolete leather from that perspective.
Dublin is definitely my favorite in their line. I like the rustic look, the more broken in look right away. And I like veg tan, so it's overall a really nice hide. It's my favorite from Horween. We've also got, well, and you mentioned the CXL lottery
Correct.
briefly.
Yeah.
So that's something that people talk about, which I guess
you can see it
for
right
people
here.
who don't know what it means,
If you see the nasty spots on there, that's one piece of the Chrome XL lottery. If you see the really bad grain break on the inside of the boot right here, where you can see a lot of these deep creases and notches of this loose grain, it's not the worst loss. My naturals actually have a couple worse spots in it. It's the really kind of like loose grain, non-tight grain, but the biggest part is this is what's called a bloom spot. So blooming on oiled leathers is where you get kind of this white film. I can brush this away and it'll be back the next day. This bloom spot and this bloom spot I have never gotten to go away. And to this day, they're still tacky to the touch.
And it's a lottery, not just, that the builder said, fuck it, we're going to give them a bad piece, because some of this stuff can't be seen until later.
Yes.
Or at least not until it's been lasted. Some of it, you don't even notice it. It can't really be seen until it's already arrived at the customer.
And they've got hundreds of hours of break-in too.
Some of it's aggravated by the break-in. So waxed flesh is another one they do. Waxed flesh is literally CXL, but they flipped it over and dyed it from the other side. And then they put it through these giant glass rollers, like, I don't know how many dozens of times, just over and over and over and over, until it looks pretty much smooth.
And it feels very smooth.
It is gonna roughen up over time as it wears, and you lose some of that wax, and you wear it off. Here. So you'll start to get pieces come up that make it look more like the rough out that it is, and a lot of people like that and consider that patina. It's a quick patina too, so you can start seeing that a lot faster than other footwear if you like that broken in quickly patina look. If you don't, you're gonna have a hard time getting it to lay down the way that it came.
Yep.
You can. And there are people that work very hard to take regular rough outs and turn them into a smooth, but you're just never going to be able to do it as well as Horween did it to begin with. Partially because you can't put the pressure on it that they do for as long as they do, and partially because once you've put all those stitches into it, you don't have as flat of an area to rub it in as well,
and burnish it down real good. Correct.
You can get most of it.
The other crappy part about that is a lot of times after about 500 hours, your two boots won't be the same color. They'll be noticeably different in shades, since they're not necessarily going to get uniform amounts of wax. The hide's going to penetrate and absorb differently in different areas. The bigger complaint is, like I said, that's a pair of whites, Bounty Hunters, and Cinnamon Wax Flex I just showed. Its other pair of boot is a whole shade lighter. Now, some of that could be whites mixing hides. Some of that could be the placement and choice of the leathers that went into the boot. But it is one of those things that if you're looking for two uniform colors, wax flesh, except for maybe black, is not the place to be. It does have a cool look, and it is pretty durable, fairly waterproof. or sorry, I should say water resistant. It's I mean I have two. One's stiffer, one's softer. It's not high up on my list. It's a good work alternative if you need not a heavy duty work leather. I think there's still better options, but a lot of people like it. It's cool patina. It's a unique thought, especially if you do tons of like of a brace. I would say it's definitely one of the better hiking boot options for a lighter hiking boot. That's definitely an area where I think it shines quite well.
You're accident prone and you work in an office and you're good at scraping things up. Of course, it is rough out, so it is better for scraping, and it might be the boot for you from that standpoint.
Yep. One of the ones I do not have here that is similar tannage to the waxed is it's kind of does the exact opposite. It uses a dry wax instead of a wet wax. Is their Predator line, which is the exact opposite of waxed. Every scrape imaginable is going to show on it. It's got a very chalky finish to it, and the scratches reveal a much lighter version of what's on top by 2 or 3 shades. So every scratch is going to be super duper noticeable. I have had Orange Predator in the past. I know some people have Predator Whiskey, Predator Steel. Not a fan of it personally. It's not one I would own again. But it's right for some people.
It's an odd leather. It's an odd leather to me.
It is. I think it was meant for bags originally, if I remember right.
They have some cool colors. I mean, orange is a very, very popular color from a lot of people's estimations, preferences. Whiskey is another popular, and that's steel. As I mean, that blew up in the last year as far as popularity. It shows a lot of colors through it. Wears real nice. It looks real good with some indigo stained on it. Personally, I'm a product of the 80s. I don't care for anything gray because at that point in time, we got beat in the fucking head with it. And everything was gray for a period in the 80s. I guess the mid 80s to the late 80s, just everything was gray. My parents still have a basement that is just gray everywhere that you fucking look. Enough to make you puke. So I'm just done with anything gray, and nothing anybody can say or do is going to make me buy anything gray again. But for the younger crowd that didn't go through that, yeah, that steel gray has been really, really popular from the Predator line.
Yep. It's a unique color too. I personally have a different gray color I like a lot more, but I mean, people have sold a ton. Like more than one boot company has sold a ton of that Predator steel, so can't argue with results. So of the leathers we've mentioned,
and it's a thick leather, it's a sturdy leather, and it's a struck through leather. We know a guy, Jan, in Germany, who bought the Predator Blue, or Predator Ink, they call it, and he had him do it as a rough out, and then he worked really hard right away to wax it up to make it into a wax flesh, smooth. Came out really nice.
Yeah, only blue wax flesh I've ever seen, except for the Merriam Ink Chiha, or the CF Stead has like a Royal Ink wax flesh as well. But yeah, Jan's boots turned out real good. All the stuff we've mentioned so far, with the exception of the Dublin, is a chrome tan with the veg retan. I think Predator is the highest retan at 25% Chrome brand, 70 to 75% veg tan. But most of the rest of them are right around 50 chrome, 50 veg retan.
Their Cordovan is supposed to be their shell.
Yep.
It's supposed to be the best in the world.
Certainly my favorite shell cordovan. So this is bourbon shell cordovan right here. As you can see, it's going to be different colors at different parts of the boots. That's because, as we talked about, shell cordovan's actually technically a waxed flesh that is plenished super duper smooth and shiny with the jack glazing and glass rods through a plenishing hammer. Now, cordovan's different from everyone. Most cordovan is known for its thin flexibility, workability. Horween shell is stiff as fuck. This stuff rates it at like an 8 to 9 on the temper scale. As you can see in the shaft, like it fights moving, it fights bending. It gets a very heavy rolled look. You get a lot of these real heavy lumps, and these lumps actually aren't smooth anymore. Like I can feel what feels like I'm kind of running over a slightly sanded surface, like a 400 grit surface with my fingers. It is not like that 2000 grit smooth feel that you get down in these other layers. And as you can see, some of the panels are going to actually alter in color a little bit due to how the light hits them. And also, whatever random stains I've gotten on them. But I will say, I do own Shinky. I do own Ricardo. I own Merriam. And I will soon own Chloe Shell Cordovan. And it is hands down my favorite shell. Like, it's not even close. The other shells are just a very different product from this. Now, this is double the price of the second most expensive shell, which is Shinky. Shinky, a standard 2.2 square foot shell, is going to run you around $260 to $310. It is like $465 for a Horween shell of the same size. Ricardo, that shell runs you like $170, $180. Chloe, around the same thing. Merriam, it's around $210. There's also Ledar Ogawa, and there's around Shinky prices. That's another Japanese shell tannery. So their shell is close to double the price of everybody else's. Shinky used to be a little cheaper, but as it's getting more popular, that same 2.2 used to be around like 240, 260. It's only kind of started creeping into the 300s as their horse butt has really taken off in popularity. Stuff takes 6 to 9 months to make, depending on what color it is. They have a pretty... It's expanding, but it's still a restrictive color line compared to Shinky, compared to Merriam, who... Shinky has 11 or 12 colors. Merriam has 16 colors. Chloe's running around 9 to 12 colors. This used to only come in natural, amaretto, bourbon, color 2, color 4, color 6, color 8. Color 8's name was Cordovan. Color 6 is 3/4 of what goes into color 8. 4 is half of what goes into it. 2 is 25%. That's known as Garnet Shell Cordovan now. Some of them got names, some of them didn't. But they now also have a navy shell, an intense blue shell, UV shell Cordovan, ultraviolet shell Cordovan. There's one other color that's new. It's like a pink color. But so they do have quite a few additional shell colors. Now they also have like natural, where bourbon was kind of like their lowest natural previously. So they're up there in shell colors now. I think they're close to 15 now, but a lot of those colors were not heavily offered or easy to get. They're what are known as rare shell Cordovan colors, which is what Alden used to run as kind of their Ponzi scheme of, locking down those colors. But a lot of people can get them. Oh, I forgot Ravello. Ravello is like their most famous one. It's the cigar shell Cordovan. But these days, a lot of people can get these. It's not as hard. You can go through Tannery Row. It might take 6 months to get it, but you can order a lot of that shell now. A lot of the Indonesians have it. Like that same boot I have there, that's a Renav. I have a intense blue shell version of that coming here soon. But
they've also got a bison.
Yep.
They call Montana, which
it's very different.
You own that one?
Yep. The uppers are Wicket and Craig English Bridle. The lowers are Montana Bison. Yeah, I switched to the Montana Bison when I did the Rainer conversion. So it's got like line striations that match kind of more of the process that like Seidel does. This is minimally shrunk, so it's not going to have like the deep flakings that something like Law has. It's not bad. It's decent thickness. It's got a nice temper to it. It's not too soft. It's not too hard. Would I buy it again over Law? No. But is
Yeah, I
is
mean,
it like
I don't own
Seidel's
it.
Fuck It Bucket? Absolutely not.
I don't own it, but yeah, to me, it's just it's not enough personality. I definitely want to do the laws, so don't care for their bison. And that
I do
covers
own multiple of the laws. I just Jeff's got the laws for later, so I brought the Montana in.
the they do, like you said, they they have Tannery Row, which they created for smaller companies or for individuals that want to order leather in their lines, because Horween has very, very high order quantities if you order straight from them at their regular prices. But the Tannery Row makes it available to us at a premium
Yep.
if we wanted to buy smaller quantities of it. And oh, and the Tannery Row has other tanneries in it too that kind of come and go. Walpier is an Italian one that they seem to have quite a bit. CF Stead from the UK is another one that they'll have sometimes. There's, I think there's like three or four other tanneries that kind of go in and out of their rotation that they try to offer.
They do a good job. Tannery Row is good to work with. They're pretty solid company. The best thing about them is they can get you the shell colors if you're willing to wait. Otherwise, the size of orders you got to do is huge. Like enough that would make a lot of the normal distributors' eyes water.
Definitely. Law Tannery would be next on the list. It's Milwaukee. They used to be the same company as the next one we'll mention, which is Galoon. They kind of broke apart. I don't know why. I don't know if it was a family disagreement or different focuses on what leathers to use. But at any rate, Law specializes in bison. They are, in my opinion at least, the premier best bison tannery in the world. I guess it kind of helps that since bison is a North American animal, you're not really going to be expecting to find any tannery somewhere else in the world. It's a little bit like saying the Super Bowl is the best in the world because nobody plays the our football anyplace else in the world.
The only thing close is
Next,
water buffalo from India, which would be like uh, Arif and Sons, but they're one unique person out of a very large pool in the world.
one that they do most is the bighorn bison. They've got another line, I can't remember what it is, that's a little bit tamer, that's a little bit more like the Montana that he just showed you. And of course, they've got the Palisades, which is a limited run series for them. They take some of the better bighorn hides and put them aside and make them available as a Palisades as a big batch in some different than normal color. So that's what this one is a Palisades blue. It's nothing like their regular blue. Um, Very cool leather. Good temper, not too much, not too little. And so that covers Law, and then, like I said, Galoon, which is also Milwaukee, which is somewhat related to Law, or at least was. He's got a belt to show us from them.
This is Cognac horse rump. One of the few that do American. This is a wax finish. One of the few that do an American horse rump. Most of the horse rump we're going to talk about is going to come from Europe.
Galoon's specialty is the horse rump and calf,
Shrunken calf.
and they might shrunken calf, and they might be the only cannery that's making a shrunken horse. Does anybody else do a shrunken horse?
Chloe and Shinky are the only ones that do shrunken horse.
Yeah.
But the Chloe line's very
Don't know
handsome.
much about them.
Yep.
Still trying to learn about them, and still hoping to buy my first pair of boots from them. So, kind of see where that goes. But they're supposed to be well respected, and as much as I love Law, I gotta imagine I'm gonna love dealing with Galoon as well. Um, Seidel, it also in Milwaukee, our third one in Milwaukee. Seidel supplies the work leathers to a lot of the old brands, definitely all the P&W builders. They make an extremely good, extremely tough, very thick, high temper work leather, oil tanned leather. And for a lot of these builders, it's probably the only tannery that they dealt with for decades. Or they started getting into some of the fancier leathers for some people that are wanting more casual.
Yep, since about the mid 2000s, there were a lot of them were using a California. I can't remember the tannery's name. They're using a California-based tannery that went out of business in the late 80s.
With the
That had,
cedar.
yeah, they had enough stock of it. Interesting. I'll have a point about that too. There was enough stock of it left to use up until about the mid 2000s, and that's a weird reality now. Is tanneries tan more on demand now. There's not dead stock sitting around. So, like, if Seidel went out of business tomorrow, they're not going to have Seidel for the next 7 years. They're going to maybe have it for 2 or 3. Like, just whatever people have on hand is what's going to be there. There's not going to be shelves upon shelves of dead stock. This isn't, like the old days. I mean, and a lot of people did this in the 90s. Like, we saw the same thing in the bourbon world in the 90s. There was a lot of stuff that survived through the 90s in the bourbon world that, like, if the modern ones went out of business, that did a year or two, just gone. If even it made that long. So just a very different way that it was done, in a different period in time. Seidel is still one of the kings of bang for the buck. These Seidel bins, they
Definitely.
get at very cheap prices. Like, I mean, you as an individual can go buy a side of Seidel between $115 and $130 for a side, which is pretty reasonable on a side. Most of the stuff we've shown you so far is going to usually start around the 180s to 210s a side, to creeping up into the 330s a side. Something like Dublin is going to be close to 330 a side. So I mean, these work leathers are about a third the price of some. Well, I mean, not even counting Cordovan. Cordovan, to get 22 square feet, is going to be $2,000 to $3,000. But if we talk about like sides of leather, right? I mean, they're unless we start getting into some of the lower, more mass-produced lines, they're quite a bit more expensive. And for a manufacturer, cheaper you can get your components, especially if you're not sacrificing too much for them, the cheaper you can offer your product.
Seidel can disappointingly vary a little bit too much with their colors. They can be a little inconsistent with some of their browns and their reddish hues, like the red dog and something
Yep.
else.
That red dog and chocolate vary a lot. Or sorry, red. It's not red dog. It's redwood and chocolate. So these are actually redwood uppers with chocolate lowers, but no one would. Besides this little bit of the heel counter, I could easily tell everybody that they were chocolate uppers and walnut lowers, and no one would argue with me. But they're actually redwood uppers and chocolate lowers. And that's what we kind of mean by like the Seidel inconsistency. Like if you look down the shaft here, right, like you can 100% tell that is not chocolate. It's redwood. But the reality here is, like, if it wasn't for this one portion of the heel counter, because I turned the heel counter to here, you'd believe that it's walnut. But if you could see this side or this side, it's like, that's a little dark in that area for walnut. But the front, like, if the builder told me, like, oh yeah, we accidentally built your toe cap in walnut, I'd 100% believe it. It is chocolate. How you can tell is when you, it's going to be really hard to see on camera, but when you get into this cross section right here, and I've killed all the light trying to show the cross section, but you can see in that cross section that it's too dark to be walnut. But I only know that because I know what walnut looks like, right? To the person getting their first pair of boots in chocolate, uppers and lowers, they could get a boot that looks exactly like this, and they think they bought walnut, and lo and behold, they got redwood uppers and chocolate lowers. So that's what we mean by inconsistency. This is why companies like Frank's only build a pair of boots out of a single bend of leather. A bend is two sides that's been split down the middle. And they do that on purpose because of inconsistencies. Unfortunately, Seidel has been kind of, termed the king of inconsistency. But keep in mind,
it's a work leather.
Yeah,
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you could buy
and
you could buy these at 115 bucks.
Most of the work leathers get conditioned with stuff that darkens their leather anyway, so it doesn't stay that color. So,
Yep.
And they are the best for work leather, but it's just a thing of note.
It's price versus performance thing. Like keep
They
in
do
mind.
have other leathers.
Yep. Sorry, I was gonna say, but like at 115, imagine what your volume discounts would look like. Most distributors, if you buy 5 hides, you get a 7 to 15% discount depending on the brand. Think about it if you just bought 50. This is where, when Jeff says the best work leather, price is a huge consideration, because there are other leathers just as durable as that at 3 times the price as that. So is it a better work leather? So keep in mind that scope is very, blinded, or I shouldn't say blinded, very constrained by price versus performance, right? Like this is not going to be a snap-on tool argument.
True.
I don't want to call it the Harbor Freight of the tool world, because that's Lafargue, but it is it is definitely one of those things where price is playing a huge factor into the statement that we're making about it being the best work leather.
They do more than the work leather. I mean, they've got. This is an example of their bison. Not one I would buy again. One of my regretted purchases because of the way that I now feel about who made the belt, but also because of the way that it looks and the way that the grain is, and it just does not make me happy. But they make it. I don't think that their bison is as good as Horween's, and Horween's certainly isn't as good as Law's, but it is what it is. They've also got one they call Double Shot, which is their version of CXL. It might be every bit of CXL. That's what this one is. This is a black Double Shot from Seidel, and I've been extremely happy with them. Yep. Great leather.
They are T-core. They have a higher temper than regular Chrome XL, so a lot of bag builders like them just because they don't have to line them with near as thick internals. Now, Double Shot really doesn't have a whole lot of pull-up. Some of the lighter colors do. But it is a stiffer temper that does hold its shape a little bit better than Chrome XL. Now, is it going to be as easy to maintain as just brushing it and throwing some Venetian on it? No. But hopefully you picked up on you were giving up quite a bit for that ease of maintenance that really isn't worth it. Now, if you were brand new to boots and you're seeing this, you're like, oh my god, like everybody in every brand I love only offers Chrome XL, like why is it such a terrible leather? One, its name's out there. Number two, it's like going and buying a pressure washer. Most people for their first one or two are going to buy sealed Chinese-made units, not serviceable European-made units. They're not going to go get the creme de la creme of the Krenzla, right, that they use at like actual car washes, because you could get them for like $850 for little small ones this big to mount on your wall. You're most likely going to go get a Sunjo or a Greenworks or whatever one that's been slapped together by that Chinese factory whatever day. This really kind of falls into that same category, right? Like they're giving you a leather that you just gotta buy a horsehide brush and Venetian shoe cream, and you don't need anything else to maintain it. A lot of these other leathers that we're showing you outside of Chrome XL are going to need extra conditioners, extra dye adding agents, blah, 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 to maintain some of that look that isn't quite as required with Chrome XL. So keep that in mind.
Next one is a lot of our favorites, Wickett and Craig in Pennsylvania. It's actually originally a Canadian company. It was originally located outside of Toronto, but they've been in Pennsylvania for quite a bit of years. They're doing a lot of great stuff, and they keep their order quantities low, so it's easily approachable for the smaller companies and the individuals to buy leather from them. Their main lines, I think there are only four lines, is Latigo and English Bridle, Harness, and Double Stuff. Two of those being versions of the other two. And I guess you know a little bit more about being able to describe well
Yeah,
the
so
different
the English Bridle...
summer versus...
Yeah, the English Bridle and the double, or no, sorry, not double. So the English Bridle and the oiled Latigo or Latigo, whichever one, don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to call it Latigo from here, but here's your warning that it might be Latigo. Come from the English Bridle crusts. So the crust, which is the starting leather before they've dyed it when they've done the basic tanning process, oiled Latigo and English Bridle share those crusts. Double Stuff shares the harness crust. They look for two very different realities. English Bridle is exactly what it says. It's meant to be the bridle for a horse. It needs to wrap around the face. It needs to maintain its shape. It needs to be able to absorb its sweat without deforming. That is what it's meant for. So it's used in areas that need to be stiff. It's a pigmented finish on top. It is not an aniline finish. If we think of this as woodworking, it is a paint, not a stain. And oiled Latigo uses that same crust. Now, oiled Latigo is aniline finished, which is stained. It's also heavily infused with waxes and oils the same way Chrome XL is, and it has a very, very dramatic pull-up compared to Chrome XL. It's got a very Dublin-like pull-up. I think Jeff has some brown oiled Latigo that I can see there in the background. This is what I would be considered their best boot leather when it comes to Wickett and Craig, is the oiled Latigo. It's super easy, not a lot of maintenance. It is a T-core leather, breaks in quite well, holds its shape extremely well, especially for a boot that does get some of that kind of Dublin rustic look very quickly. English Bridle is a very similar leather, but like I said, it is not oil tanned. It is not aniline finished. It is painted, so it's got a pigment finish. It makes it a little bit stiffer. Makes it a little bit harder to break in, but it does maintain its shape extremely well, as it's meant to do.
And you can see the pull-up on this one.
Yes.
I mean, all this leather is the same, but there's no pull-up going on up here, and it's really dark, which is the way it would have looked when it was sitting on the table. But if you look down here, there's a lot more red hue showing, and that's because it got stretched out. So that's the pull-up that you're seeing. I can't really do any pull-up exercise for you here because there's nothing I can really squeeze very well.
It's a Riker
because of the canvas.
Yeah. I mean, oiled Latigo is it. If I had to pick a favorite from the American Tanneries, I can only choose the American Tanneries, and I had to make a boot that I needed to use on a daily basis, oiled Latigo would be my choice of everything else we're going to show you. While the Horween Shell Cordovan is definitely one of my favorites, that is not a leather I'd want to wear every day, especially at its temper. Especially at some of the extra care that it needs. Like, you would... To give everybody an idea, that boot that I showed is $1,000 in leather to make that boot. Before you talk about labor or anything else.
Just the leather.
Just the leather. That's not the midsole. That's not the footbed. That's not the lifting leather. That's not the outsole, speed hooks, thread, blah, blah, blah. That is just the pieces needed to make the boot with no mistakes in the sewing, lasting process, any of that. It's not cheap. You usually get around 2 to 3 large shells. As I said earlier, those large shells run about $460. So you're $1,000 to $1,200, no problem.
Wicket and Craig is all veg tan.
Yep.
Everything that they do is veg tan. That is their deal. And I think they do a lot more colors than any of the others that we mentioned as far as American Tanneries.
They do. And fourth wall break, they're starting to experiment with European pigments, so I think their color line's actually going to get bigger. That's where that new slate, crimson, sapphire, and electric blue cobalt that we saw. That's zucchini right there. That's an English bridal.
This is another one that, it's a bright color. I love it. Great color. My opinion. Certainly not for everyone.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep, that's English bridal.
I love it.
On the other side of the house, the one we didn't mention is harness. So this is right here is milled natural harness. So harness is what the double stuffed and the harness come from in the crust. You're going to see a looser grain leather, a little bit lighter in temper, a little bit more fat lines. This one's going to show almost no pull up because it's milled. The process of putting the emboss, I've almost worked all the mill marks out of it, but there you can see it really good on that kiltie. Like that's what it would have looked like before, right here in this kiltie. But these mill marks, they work their way out. When they mill it, it pretty much kills all the pull up that harness would have had anyway. So these milled ones will have almost no pull up, but the regular harness will. The milleds are also extremely soft. Like this is probably one of the softest boot leathers I own. Before we talk like kudu, ostrich, kangaroo, deerskin, stuff like that. Personally, I would kind of stay away from harness. I don't think harness is a great boot leather. In terms of a saddle, which everything Wicket and Craig comes from like a saddle perspective, right? This would be what you sit on. This is going to be where the molded pieces of where your butt go. If it's not Latigo, because Latigo is originally a wet mold leather. The oiled Latigo is kind of like to make the Chrome XL version of that, right? It's going to be the parts that mold but are softer, right? It's going to be the belts that go around the belly of the horse that aren't bridle. It's going to be straps. It's going to be where your butt sits, and a lot of the other parts of a saddle that are not like key pieces that would relate to specific need. Its only specific need is its ability to mold, and that's what it has. And from there, you're targeting more of a comfort spec. The double stuff is literally that, but they take the oiled Latigo process, turn it up to 11, and give you one of the biggest pull-up leathers besides maybe Badalassi Carlo Waxy that exists. That is mostly a NYX exclusive right now. I don't know if that's going to make it to anybody else, but it does exist. I think they currently make it in 6 colors. Which for a new line of leather that's not even a year old or right around a year old, that's a pretty good amount of colors already.
Next one is Herman Oak. It's the big old tannery that nobody has heard of.
Yep, their website's as ancient as their company is. Straight out of the 80s.
They are an extremely old company, extremely well respected by leather workers, cobblers, etc. But they are not big on colors. They're bigger on just providing you with a plain veg tan and saying color it yourself.
Yep, that one didn't even come finished. That's a hand glazed Herman Oak belt. So you couldn't even get glazing or finish on it. Like it had to be hand glazed.
So these are used by the type of places that will do a lot of tooling on the leather, and then they'll finish it in whatever shades and hues or whatever different stains and whatnot to get special, unique looks and colors that they want. It's just like I said with the Horween, going straight through Horween, Herman Oak has crazy high minimums. So anybody smaller that would be wanting to use it, they'd have to be buying it from a third party. So they're very prohibitive, and like I said, not very interesting. But they have access to the grade A, highest quality leathers to start with, and do a very good job.
Yep.
What they do.
I don't think they do anything under 10 ounce, so it's something that would need heavy work to even be used in a pair of boots in the first place.
SB Foot, Minnesota. It was not always owned by Red Wing, but is owned by Red Wing now. Individuals can buy from SB Foot, but I'm not familiar with any companies that are building with it other than Red Wing. So it's really just mostly become an in-house tannery.
Yep.
For Red Wing.
I know I've seen some Indonesian makers make with it, but nothing company-wise. So most people probably recognize these kilties I have in front of me. This is Rough Out Oro Legacy. In the Rough Out form, it's called Creamsicle. But this is the Oro Legacy that everybody loves for their Red Wing mock toes. In its Rough Out form, as you can see, it is dyed from the opposite side for Creamsicle. But this is the Oro Legacy color. And then this is a leather that most people aren't going to recognize off the hop. This is glazed amber harness. This is what your amber harnessed Iron Ranger looks like before they stretch it over the last. Now, if I take it and I give it a real good pinch here, you can see me take almost all the sheen out of it by about that point right there. But yeah, this is amber harness. It's got quite a bit of pull-up. It is obviously an oil-tanned leather. It's got the same finished rough outside you would see if you got through your liner on a Iron Ranger. But yeah, this is amber harness. So people can get it. Some people do work with it. I'm going to be honest with you. SB Foot is not the greatest tannery. These kilties are pretty decent quality. I think Dale got these from Maverick through SB Foot. These are pretty good. Like some of the best SB Foot I've seen. Like some of this is better than like the stuff I've actually seen on boots that they sell, which still kind of blows my mind a little bit.
There's a reason why Red Wing was able to purchase them.
Yep.
It's because they weren't one of the better tanneries.
Yeah.
And
they also don't have a specialty
considering
either.
the quality and thickness of Red Wing boots, Red Wing didn't need them to be the best tannery in the world either. Yep. So, yeah, that's kind of the end of the story on that.
Which is strange because this is 8-ounce creamsicle. So, like, they do thicker leathers. They just don't for some reason.
On their boots.
Your guess is as good as mine. Like I said, I was when Dale got this, he got this in 8 colors, and he was blown away because he's ran SB Foot before, and it's all been pretty meh quality. But, like, this stuff came out fantastic.
If they cut it in half, then I guess they'd have a thin suede as well as the thin smooth.
Yeah. When it looks like it is tanned to be done that way. So if you look, there's a very clear. Let's see if I can get some focus here. Very clear. Yeah, you can see right there. There's clearly meant to be 2 colors there. So. Let's see if I do something like this here. But you can see the 2 defined lines that this definitely is meant to be split. Like basically right down the center and get this color on one side and this color on the other. But,
last one for the USA, specifically as far as North America, is Tasman. Tasman you won't see talked about as far as boots, which is what we're focusing on, but we thought we should mention it anyway. It is more of a fashion tannery. They make much thinner leathers, offer much thinner leathers, and it would be project leather or maybe handbag leather or
just
things like that.
Look, these kilties each have around 300-400 hours on them. Look how bad they look at 300-400 hours. These are actually fairly thick, so these are 6.5 ounce. But if you look, it is a T-core leather, and this is a very I don't want to call it Doc Marten because it's a higher quality than Doc Marten, but it's a Doc Marten kind of patina or
Yeah.
not patina, patent leather style finish. Like it is heavily corrected, lots of plastic to maintain. Like this is something that like your Michael Kors handbags. So this is emerald green and these are cobalt blue. I mean, this is something that like your Michael Kors handbag is supposed to like maintain its color with after 1,000 hours of use and still look like new. On a pair of boots, like once you beat through this, like, so these are the front colors, right? These are the back colors. You don't want that poking through. They're fashion leathers. I mean, they're decent quality. They're actually pretty stiff, to be 100% honest. Like getting these folds into them, these are probably the most uncomfortable kilties I've broken in. And Jeff can tell you I've broken in like 6 sets of shell cordovan kilties, which are next up on the list of the worst to break in. And then it would be Shinky Horse Rump after that. They're not great. Like they get nice and floppy now. Like now they're nice and floppy and flexible. They didn't start that way. But yeah, it's not a boot leather. And like I said, I just can't imagine like, see if I can, because the green comes through real good. But let me in real life, it does on the camera. But like, look where the speed hooks have just gouged the fuck out of it, and how kind of nasty it looks. Like that's what any time like a rock touched your boot would do. Nobody wants that. Cool leather, actually done pretty decent for kilties. Not my first choice due to kind of how they, as you can see, most kilties don't get these super deep ridges in them like this that permanently stay. But it is an American tannery. Tasman is a fairly large group. They do make, this is their Gen X leathers, which is kind of like their Chrome XL-ish kind of leather. You'll see that theme across a lot of these. Everyone has like a Chrome XL style alternative because they're trying to capitalize on that particular market. But yeah, I mean, it's tannery that exists. It's a fairly decent sized tannery group. They do make good products, just not for boots.
Our last North American, which is the only one outside of the USA, would be Lafarque. Lafarque is in Mexico. Lafarque, we had a picture we were going to
right
put up on the screen for you.
Yep. So you'll recognize a bunch
big
of brands
one
that use
being
them.
Thursday, Drew's Mexican line, which you won't see on that chart. Timberland, Justin, Wolverine, Tony Lama,
Blundstone,
Tandy,
Wolverine.
Tevacoas, and Shot. The Shot really surprises and disappoints me. For those who don't know, it's a very old New York place that makes a lot of jackets. They made like the original like biker James Dean leather jacket, and they're very well known for making peacoats as well. And the fact that they are using Lafarque is a huge disappointment for such a history USA, high quality, high price company. But there it is. Shot does buy from them. It's a really good tannery. I mean, there is a ton of great boot factories in Mexico. Very long history. Leon being the biggest one. But I guess I do kind of put a bit of an asterisk when we call them one of the best boot places in the world, because they are one of the best boot places in the world for cowboy boots. And there are a ton of cowboy boots out there, and they make them as good as anybody else. I can't think of any other kinds of boots that I would want to buy from there because it's not their specialty. But with the history that they have, I'm sure that they do a good job at everything they do. Maybe not the best job.
Yeah, Thursdays are made there. Like I said, most of Wolverine's line is made there. There's a lot of Timberlands made there. I mean, you saw the cowboy boots on the list. Tons of cowboy boot companies are down there. And I want to say there was someone, one of the last companies, I don't know if it was Vining, but one of the last companies is getting a ton of lasts made down there these days. Jones instead. It's not Jones and Vining, but there's another big last
I don't
name.
remember anything from Jones and Vining coming from Mexico.
Theirs
Could be.
don't. Theirs don't. Because when you go into Lisa's shop, she has a bunch of Leon made ones and a bunch of Jones and Vining ones. So a lot of styles are coming from down there, not just like cowboy boot styles. Lots of heritage boot styles.
So it's a huge tannery, and it's a really good tannery.
It's in a particular price scale. Like it kind of follows the Seidel thing. So take the same logic as Seidel, but cut the price in half, and you'll kind of land exactly where you are again. You know, when it comes to leathers and boots, right? It depends on how connected you are with the price of your boots. Some people are not connected at all. I would definitely fall into that side of the spectrum. I see a leather, I want a leather. Don't give a fuck about the details beyond that point, right? But that's me. And there's going to be other individuals like me. And there's going to be people that are not like me. People who are going to, you know, scrutinize and, you know, itemize every piece of the purchase and argue about every upcharge that Frank's or Nick's or West Coast or White's wants to do on their boots, you know, trying to bring the price down, right? That's always going to exist. It's in that same spectrum. So when we talk about, you know, Seidel being the best work boot leather, price is a huge part that's really pushing it above the competition. Because if you're just going to go beat the ever-living fuck out of it, why do you want a $600 leather? You don't. Lafarque is really in that same category, right? Like, why are Thursdays made with Lafarque? Because they're trying to hit a $200 price point. It's quite simple in that. That's the reality. And then once again, if you work in a concrete jungle like New York City, Los Angeles, Dallas, Austin, something like Thursdays, man, no one's going to notice difference in places like that. What you're not going to do is walk into a machine shop in one of those towns wearing a pair of Thursdays and expect them to survive the next 3 months. That's not going to happen. And that's kind of where the difference here gets. I mean, like some of the Wolverines, like the steel toes you can buy from the store, those are Lafarque. You know, they'll work, they'll survive, but those are boots, you know, people replace every 3 to 6 months. And that's what you're getting out of it. But you're getting it at a price point. Like I said, the Lafarque hides are probably easily half the price of Seidel, if not maybe even cheaper than that. But, I mean, you're getting, I mean, it's not Indian, you know, chrome tan capital of the world levels of, you know, just slap it over everything and we're good. They have quality control. Their leather is well respected for its price point. But we just have to understand what the limitations are at that price point. And this is why it was included in this list, because when we talk about Lafarque, there's a strong chance that if you walk into a Boot Barn or a Vanderbilt's or, you know, whatever your local work boot center is, every third boot's probably going to be a Lafarque boot in one way or another, or using components made by Lafarque. That's why I bring it up.
Chippewa is a Justin company, so it wasn't on that list, but their stuff is going to be Lafarque. I don't know for sure, but I would guess that Carolina and Georgia are probably also using Lafarque.
Strong chance.
Could be wrong.
Yep.
But probably. Considering that their big competition, Wolverine, is using it, and that's one of their biggest competitors, along with Chippewa and well, Red Wing. But I'm not really who does Danner and Thorogood use?
So Thorogood's a U.S.
Are they Seidel, or they could be using Lafarque too?
So Thorogood doesn't say who they use. It's kind of a mystery. Danner, who is in Portland, is heavily assumed to most likely be Lafarque. I don't know if anyone's ever 100% confirmed it, but at their price point, what they get. Now, that being said, you know, Wolverine has their heritage line that uses a lot of Horween and Seidel products. You know, just because you saw your favorite company on the list doesn't mean that they don't have
Everything they make.
Yeah. They don't use it in everything they make. Just a lot of times, their more basic or standard offerings are probably going to be, you know, start as Lafarque and then upgrade as necessary. And
even Doc Martens has a Horween line.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, so there is going to be exceptions to this. So like the like I said, Shot's one that survives me. Tandy leather surprised me a little bit. Dan Post is another one that kind of surprises me. Lucchese as well. Dan Posts and Lucchese's are not cheap. Those are expensive ones.
Yeah,
Like,
Lucchese's on that list too. And I think it probably comes down to where that boot is made, because those are two companies that I believe still make in the United States as well. So I would kind of guess that their United States made ones with the higher price tag are probably
yeah,
from a USA tannery, whereas their more mainline and lower level boots that are made in Mexico are using the Lafargue.
yep, probably 100% spot on. And keep in mind, right? Like not everything a tannery does can be a home run, right? We have to understand that every tannery is going to have lines that are hits and lines that are misses. That's why companies like Wickett and Craig still only have 4 lines, because the stuff they've tried to do probably hasn't landed very well. Horween has lines we didn't talk about that fall under the Dublin line, like the Derby and the Essex, that are kind of the same thing. The Essex is kind of a flop line. A lot of people don't like the Essex. It's a softer, gets beat up more, doesn't hold its shape. Like, it's leaning more towards the Chrome XL process and less from the Shell Cordovan process, and it's not as popular. Some people have ran it. You don't see its name as much in the last 2 or 3 years. It is what it is. And every company's going to have lines that don't hit, right? So the reason that why lines survive and don't survive comes down to market adaptability and if it took off. Why did Chrome XL, even though we've kind of beat it over the stump here, get such a bad rap from us? Quite simply because it's a basic beginner leather, and its good qualities die at that point. Like, everything that makes it easy to care for, makes it, all the things they say, oh, this is why it's great for beginners. The second you're past all of those fears, it offers nothing unique, nothing better than any of its competitors at a significantly higher price point that honestly just doesn't age the best. I mean, it's originally meant to be a gasket. It's meant to be a wearable use-out leather. Like, it started as a head gasket and spent a lot of time as aerospace gaskets.
Yep. For all you automotive guys out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Gaskets.
yeah, long before the days of RTV and all the liquid gaskets we have now, and before quart gaskets became a thing. This was one of the originals. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it was either 1916 or 1921 that Chrome XL was originally developed. Like I said, it's based. The tanning process for it is very similar to the Shell Cordovan process, right? It's based off the Shell Cordovan process, except Shell Cordovan's 100% veg tan. There's no chrome tan part to speed it up. Shell Cordovan takes 6 to 9 months. Chrome XL takes 6 weeks. That's what it was done for, right? It was speed, and based on the time frame of that being near World War One or post World War One, whichever of those dates, I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. You understand like the specifics of the urgency and like why everything in that era is built around speed, right? Like, why did Goodyear welting become so popular around that time? Because it's literally 15 times faster than hand welting, and it saves the entire hand lasting process on top of it. This is the why. It's just not hard to understand that it's funny because a lot of people like picking up military surplus stuff from the wars, thinking like, oh yeah, this is great made shit for the wars. Well, no, probably not. A lot of times, stuff made during wartime is hastily thrown together so you have something rather than nothing. A half-ass made boot is better than no boot to march across Europe in, right? So that's the kind of oxymoron from that perspective. But I mean, this is where a lot of these processes and stuff come from. Everything has a history and a future, and it's just important to know that Chrome XL wasn't meant to be a work boot. A lot of the stuff we mentioned wasn't initially meant to be a work boot. Some of it was. Some of it was boot first design in mind. Like, Horween just recently released a new leather called their Stockton leather that is a 100% boot designed waterproof leather, supposedly fully waterproof.
Yeah. We should have We should have discussed that when we were discussing Halloween.
I
That's
I want to see an actual boot that's been worn for 500 hours to see what it looks like and how bad the different process, because supposedly it's not a silica impregnated process, which is traditionally what's done to pull it off. I want to see what it looks
yeah.
like after 500 hours before I even begin to form an opinion on it.
That is exactly where I'm at on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two things that are waterproof. One is that up until now, the only way I've heard of through waterproofing the leather itself is the silicone, like he just said.
It's stuffing silica into the
And
pores to not let it
that's
soak in.
certainly got its negatives to it that we discussed in another video. And so, they're supposedly doing it with fats. They're supposedly doing this new one with all natural ingredients. So I want to know how waterproof it really is. But secondly to that is that a lot of whether something is waterproof or not depends on the way that the boot is put together as well. It depends on the thread that's used. It depends on the way that it's put together. It depends on whether they've backed all the threading on the inside with waterproof like tape and stuff to help make it waterproof. It's going to still depend on the way that it's lasted as to whether any water can get in through the last
The
through the lower bottom area.
Yeah, the pattern on
So there are a
keeping
lot
the
of
seams
figures
down.
here that mean that this Stockton is really not going to mean shit. But like I said, just we'll have to see. It's going to take time to be able to give it a report card.
Yep. I'm curious, like, whatever process they're doing. They've kind of outlined what it is, but I'm curious if, one, we get more details on it, and number two, how it affects the life of the leather. Because some of the stuff that's said, I feel like, is falls into the category of conditioning your boots from day one. That's a big no-no. Some of it also feels like it could potentially kind of rot the inside of the leather from the core out if it's not getting wet. I don't know. We'll see. I try not to pass judgment. There's another Horween line I haven't seen used on anything bags called Crypto or Krypton, something like that. That I'm waiting to see someone make a boot out of it before I pass any judgment on. But it's one of those things. A lot of the American tanneries do things well. A lot of them are willing to try new things and take risks. Not as much as they were 20, 30 years ago, but they still do. But you're going to find when we do the European version of this that those guys are willing to take more risks. They're willing to be a little bit more inventive with the process. One of my biggest complaints with American tanneries compared to the European tanneries is European tanneries, 9 times out of 10, you're buying what's called double shoulder or double rump. Now, what is that? So I mentioned something called a side and a bend earlier. And what they do is they take the whole hide of the cow and they split the bend down the middle to make 2 sides. They call it a bend because it bends over on itself. And you have the 2 sides. The European tanneries have decided that this is a waste of time and a waste of tanning materials. So what they do on a cow is they stamp out the double shoulder and they stamp out the double rump, which is essentially horse rump. Same thing you do with horse rump. And the rest of it is, if it's of good quality, is either tanned into something else, like Consaria Walper uses like butter bellies for wallets and stuff that is very popular, but that's only the best ones. There's a lot of it that's just not used. Merriam only really does double shoulder and double rump. They don't do most of the rest of the hides at all. Same with Battleassie. Battleassie's all double shoulder. And a lot of that double rump gets bought up by tanneries like CF Stead, where the majority of their lineup is all double rump. And so they don't tan a bunch of the parts that companies like Frank's and Nick's throw away. Like Nick's just recently, about, 8 months ago, started selling these leather project packs that are pieces of the sides that they don't want to use for boots. That they're like, hey, maybe another leather worker wants this and can put these scrap together to make a project out of it. I mean, even when we talk like the Frank's Patriot, that is one of the few boots that they make, especially of the Seidel leathers, that end up with pieces from multiple bends. Because generally speaking, a Commander or a Highlander will only have leather from that bend in it. They will not use another bin's black to go with that black. Whatever's left over, if it can't make another 10-inch boot, it's put aside to become a Patriot. That doesn't mean that they use these inferior parts of the hide or these less than desirable parts of the hide. The hide still gets tons of pieces thrown out. They don't just start using belly because it's a Patriot and cheaper. The belly still gets cut off and not used.
Right. It's more a matter of the colors in the different pieces not being totally exactly the same shade, or because there is some visual bad marks in it that they chose not to use the first time around. So it's still a high quality, thick, long-term leather.
Yep. You might have some varying tempers as well, because they can't make the tempers exact from bend to bend. So you might have like one boot, maybe the backstay cover is a little softer, and one boot maybe it's a little firmer, like little things like that. And this is the stuff they're doing to avoid that. But from the European perspective, a lot of the tanneries just are like, yeah, we don't want to deal with that problem at all, so we're just not going to tan it. Now maybe that comes from how they have to buy hides from like the meat processors, and they're like, well, I bought this hide, so I'm going to use all of it. But tanning materials are so expensive these days, I can't help but feel that they could probably make some wins by not tanning all of it and just preparing some for the burn pile, essentially. But that's something we'll get into.
You remember, I mean, for all the leathers that we're talking about, for as far as mainline, if we're not talking about exotics at all, these leathers are all byproducts of the meat industry, of the food consumer industry. None of these, they're not being killed for the hide. We don't use there isn't anywhere near as much leather being made that comes close to the amount that's being killed for food, for ground beef, for steak, for whatever. So, we're probably, I mean, what do you think? We're probably completely throwing away at least 40% of the hides because they got killed for food, and there's not enough call for it in the leather industry to use it. So it literally gets thrown away.
I think it's higher than that. I've heard between 70 and 75% go untanned.
I've heard those numbers as well. I was trying to err on the side of
Yeah, no, I mean 100%.
under exaggerating.
Yeah,
But yeah, it could be like 70, 80% just gets thrown out. No other use for it, because there's so many people now that don't want to wear leather because, oh, I want to be nice to the animals. Well, these animals aren't dying for their leather. They're dying because they're food.
and that's a good point. So we didn't talk about it, but there's this thing called the Italian Leather Consortium that is very, very picky about like tannery practices. These guys have been around over 700 years. They have a strict set of rules, especially when we start talking about like vachetta and horse leather. They will drive you out of business if you try to like unethically harvest horse leather, which these days is already going to be difficult enough as it is. You're really going to be looking exclusively at mule, but these guys pay attention to that a lot, and they care about that very, very deeply. They will drive you out of business if they need to for doing unethical practices. So from that perspective, no one's killing for hides. It may be like exotics and furs, sure, but like no one's like growing ponies to be shell cordovan in some farm somewhere, like a fur farm. That doesn't exist. Not in the leather boot world.
These European tanneries that he's talking about with the double shoulder, maybe it's because somebody consciously looked at the situation and said, "Hey, we're using less than half of the hides that are being killed for food. So if we're not using it all, then let's be more picky about what we tan to begin with." And if the numbers are the same in America, then maybe America should be reconsidering and doing the same thing.
I mean, most calf leather, right, comes from European calf, and it's just because European calf gets a very different life than American calf. American calf it's gonna have tons of fat lines, lots of stuff that just aren't desirable for calf. So even like companies like Galoon, I'd bet money on the fact that a ton of their calf is probably coming from Europe, not actually USA calf. Now for the larger, more mature, which is a lot of like goes through Seidel and Wicket and Craig and stuff like that. 'Cause Wicket and Craig does a ton of steer hide, right? That's a very different ball game from that perspective. But even then, I mean, some of the huge steer hides that come out of Wicket and Craig, I could really see them switching to double shoulder, like really, really upping the quality of hides coming out of there, and they already have some A grade hides coming out of there.
All right. We're done.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you have any questions, please ask them down in the comments below. Do keep in mind that a lot of the stuff we've talked about here is, not necessarily gathered from like a public website where you can just go read on all of this, right? This is from interviews with the tanneries. This is from stuff like the Full Grain podcast, which actually has Nick Horween, the 4th generation member of the Horween family that still works there. And will inherit it from his dad Skip. This is information that's been gathered. The Shoegazing blog has a ton of information on a lot of this. That's a great resource, especially on obscure tanneries. But overall, this is a lot of information that takes a ton of time to pull together from that perspective. And don't get caught up on a lot of it. We've really laid down some technical intricacies and really kind of pound for pound line these guys up as hitters. In the real world, this is like comparing tools, right? Comparing 3 tool models. You're comparing 3 drills. 9 times out of 10, all 3 of those drills are going to work for everybody. This is where we're kind of getting to the nitty gritty of the features of the drill, right? So if you own one of these leathers that we've beat on kind of hard today, there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make it a lesser pair of boots. You can still enjoy them. Don't get caught up in those details. The reason we're giving these details out is so when you have the choice on your next pair, you know what to look for. You know things to watch out for. You're not fighting with the Chrome XL lottery. You're just getting an awesome piece of Dublin. This is what we bring this up for. And just to help spread some nostalgia, because as I said, a lot of this is gathered through a ton of very obscure sources. Like, not obscure as in like unknown, but it's like very obfuscated. Like there's lots of smoke and mirrors and dust and clouds. We don't just get to peel back a curtain and see the wizard. It's like you get to go through the Minotaur's labyrinth, kill the Minotaur, and now you found the wizard behind the curtain. So
yeah, hidden secrets, dirty laundry, things that people don't necessarily always want to discuss. They'd rather keep on the DL. Bringing it out there for everybody to be able to think about it and be able to look at a real pros and cons list to where they spend their hard-earned money.
Yep.
What's important to them, what's not important to them, what should matter, what shouldn't matter. And if you're, maybe dollar for dollar value or overall best, without regard to price. So, I mean, there's so many factors depending on the person, and even within the person, depending on where and how they're going to wear that pair of boots versus another pair that they own.
Yep. We mentioned that in an earlier video, picking boots with a purpose. This is where it comes in. Where would I pick a pair of Chrome XL boots? A pair of boots I only wore to church on Sundays. That's a great example where Chrome XL would shine compared to other leathers. Easy to maintain, only needs a quick brushing, no break-in. There's your win. But once you get out of that very, specific, scenario I have created to make Chrome XL look great, its flaws start to show. And it's just how well you can handle those flaws. And
At its
with
price
all the
tag,
others.
which is way too high for what it is.
Yeah. 310 aside is what it's looking at these days. That's definitely a reality. I mean, 3 years ago it was like 245 aside. So, now we've thrown some prices out. Obviously, depending on when you watch this, these prices change, they fluctuate. It's a commodities market, just like anything else. But questions down in the comments on this one. Overall, there isn't many bad choices you can make here, unless it starts and stops with SB foot. There's my jab, my red wing jab for the video. It's hard to mess this up per se. But once again, don't use this video to rate your past purchases. Use this video to inform your future ones. Like, the one thing that really needs to die out a little bit in the boot community overall is people getting into communities to validate their purchases. Being a part of the community is there to help your future purchases. They can't help your past ones. But, while some validation is definitely warranted, especially if you're brand new, this is for your next pair of boots, not the ones you currently own. For the pair of boots you currently own, we just did one on caring for them. That is the perfect starting point. This is not the one to validate your purchases.
And you mentioned it. I mean, that is one of the more difficult things for me when I'm hanging out in the groups, Reddit groups, the Facebook groups, etc. When you get people that are coming on there and they're trying to validate a product purchase that they have already made, then I'm put in a situation where I'm looking at two different things. I'm looking at what I want to say, which is, well, that's not the best leather, or that's not the leather that I would have picked, or I would have picked this because it's better, or this because it's cheaper. And I'm left not, yeah, I want to say that, but I'm left with, man, why do I want to shit on this guy's cornflakes? Why do I want to be mean to the guy? He's already made the purchase. He can't do anything about it. Why do you want to make somebody feel bad? So I end up saying something nice, or I end up saying nothing at all. But at the same time, I want to vocalize to people and help people with how to make the future purchases. So,
Yep. Thanks for watching, everybody. Like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you on the next one.
Lancha.